Welcome to another episode of Personal Brand Blueprint. I'm Dave Polykoff of ZenPost.com, your blueprint for your personal brand to find the tools, templates, and tactics to help you attract, convince, and convert your ideal client online. Again, go to ZenPost.com to check out ways that we can work together to help you launch and monetize your personal brand. On today's episode, we have Dan Nestle, Chief Curiosity Officer and founder of Inquisitive Communications. Today, we're chatting with Dan about how we can use the power of AI to grow and monetize our personal brands. So, Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here and really happy to talk about all the things I love: AI, personal brand, PR, comms, anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, the personal branding and AI kind of have an interesting relationship together. I've been on other podcasts kind of talking about it. So I definitely want to get into some of these topics. But first, I think it's
Yeah.
important to kind of just get an understanding of who you are and what you do and who you do it for. So what I like to ask at the top of every episode is, what do you do?
I'm Dan Nestle, and I have started my own company called Inquisitive Communications, and it's all based on that personal brand of curiosity. You'll hear that as a theme through almost everything that I do. Is this kind of, I landed on curiosity and inquisitiveness, etc., as a basis for the world that I live in, and the world that I live in is communications and to some extent marketing. I've been a communications pro and a marketer on the corporate side for about a couple decades now, a little over 20 years. And earlier this year, just a couple months back, actually, I launched my own company and my own brand out on my own, delivering AI acceleration, AI powered communications, AI content generation, and AI as a part of strategic communications and marketing for clients basically of any size and scope who are who want to work with me, really, essentially. But really, it's teams and companies and individuals, especially smaller companies and solopreneurs, et cetera, who want a little bit of help with AI, understand, want to get a good grasp on the fundamentals, and then figure out how to really work it into their marketing and communications. That's what I do now. Based in New Jersey, and I spent quite a bit of time in Japan. I'm very connected to global companies, Japanese companies especially. And I think it adds another kind of flavor to my brand, as it were. I'm sure we'll get to that.
Sure. So you mentioned that your services can kind of be provided to a wide array of people, but
Mm-hmm.
is there a certain type of like ideal client that is just prime and ready to work with you? Something that would be different than someone who's maybe unqualified to work with you, who's like the most qualified person that you would work with?
Yeah, I think it would be like CMOs, CCOs of organizations who really have a good grasp of the current status of change in the world of PR and communications and marketing, and but struggle to grasp it, struggle to operationalize it. So, there's conflicting demands all the time from your company and from your audiences. Audiences are getting more and more difficult to identify and to kind of hone in on, and they don't trust media, they don't trust different sources, so they're going to trust you more and more and more. So if you're struggling, especially with how are you going to reach your audiences better, how are you going to be a remarkable communicator or a remarkable marketer, you're going to need to rely on your content, you're going to need to rely on your targeting, and really be relevant and resonant. AI is one of the tools, or one of the major tools, that you can do to help you with that process. Maybe you don't quite understand how far you can take it, or maybe you're dabbling with it and you're just, hey, I can do an email with it or something, and you're about at that level. But you haven't taken that next step to really embed it into your organization and your team, and really seek the efficiencies and the productivity boosts and the strategic kind of benefits that come from working closely with AI. So that, I know it's kind of broad, but those kind of folks are the people that I'm really looking at. Also, if you have a team, or if you are an executive and you want to understand more about this, I do spend time as a subject matter expert, speaking, and certainly at for agencies and so on. where I'm accustomed to, sitting down one on one and walking people through this whole thing. It's just, and getting folks to a level of understanding and awareness of what AI or generative AI specifically can do for you, and that aha moment, like that AI aha moment that is eluding so many people. I help you get there. So it's a little broad, but it's kind of the fun area that I live in right now.
You mentioned some aha moment. Let's talk about that for you because AI has been around for a while now, but really starting to come into its own over the last like year or two. What was the aha moment for you? What's kind of give us that backstory of how you got into AI and then really
Sure.
understood its value in PR and communications?
Right. And it is all connected to personal brand as well because, I've been focused in on, oh, I've been unfocused on so many things my whole career as far as my own personal brand goes. And really working very hard to boost the brands of the companies that I worked for to build awareness. And I never kind of turned the lens inside towards myself. And back in November of 2022, I mean, many of you out there will remember that's the day that, or November 30th, I believe it was the day that ChatGPT launched and made itself known. And there was a post that day from a fellow named Shelley Palmer, and Shelley Palmer is like a leading expert in this field. And my own kind of mentor, personal guru, if you want to call him that, but also good friend Mark Schaefer, who literally wrote the book on personal brand, or one of the great books on personal brand called Known, Known. Been friends with him for a while, but he sent out an email to his community and just said, Shelley Palmer today just announced that I am 80% replaced by AI. 80%, not 100%, 80%. That was sort of the aha moment right there, because that sweet spot of, or that maybe dangerous spot in some cases of being a creator, being somebody who relies on words for a living. When one of the leaders in that field says, "Oh, I'm 80% replaced today," and that was in November of 2022, you pay attention. So, it didn't take long to see what this thing was, and for me to kind of say, "Wait a second, yeah, I mean, if I just do nothing, maybe I will be, replaceable, but." Why is that extra 20% there? Like, why isn't it 100%? And that extra 20% turns out that that's personal brand. That's where you say, okay, I can't rely on the largesse of organizations or companies, to keep me employed if it doesn't make sense to do that. If I'm replaced or replaceable, what's the incentive? But on the other hand, if I have something really special to offer that only I can do, or at least only a handful of people can do, that's where I need to be doubling down in order to really survive and thrive in the world that's coming. So that, maybe that's a moment, maybe it's a week, but that was the time where I was like, you know what, I need to take this personal brand stuff seriously, and I need to really focus in on AI, especially because, I think it's going to be important. Then I started really getting into AI, like using it and working with it. That's when, then like all kinds of different possibilities started to open up. I'm one of those people who, it's funny because I always say when somebody says I'm one of those people who, then the thing that follows is disingenuous. But I am, attracted to the bright, shiny objects, right? I'm an ADHD guy. I'm perfectly out there with it. And I wanted to make sure that AI wasn't just a bright, shiny object that I was chasing, because I had a habit of doing that. In this case, though, I found AI to be the supercharger for ideas and for things that I've always wanted to do, but either didn't have the patience to do or didn't have some of the skills to do. Like, for example, being into the connection between communications, like PR and communications, and real data. That's always been a connection that PR pros have been hard. It's been hard for PR pros to really make. What are the analytics we should be looking at? How do we show value, the value of the work we're doing to our employers or to our clients? And, that the state of measurement, the state of kind of proving your worth has been a constant embroiling kind of sea of discussion and discourse over decades. What I saw with AI though, and it like almost immediately was, this can help me understand what's going on out there in the world. Like if I take my metrics, if I take my results, if I take, social listening information, if I, whatever data that I have out there that talks about either the brand I'm representing or the story, I can probably extract a lot more useful information. So I always start with this kind of questions like, wouldn't it be great if we could fill in the blank, right? So like, wouldn't it be great if we could really figure out how our brand is resonating, for example? Now I'm not going to claim that I got there, but I saw AI as this platform that can help me really get there. And as initially ChatGPT, but as the other LLMs started to develop more capabilities where you could, feed it more information, give it more data, like, upload spreadsheets, charts, etc. I'm like, okay, I have an insight team in my pocket. And that's what I always wanted. I wanted to be offer those insights. So that's where I kind of saw that going. And I just started to double down that direction. So I'm not sure if that goes far like kind of astray from your original question, Dave, but I think that's really kind of the beginning of the story. And I just doubled down on it and kept on top of it. I will add that through Mark Schaefer and through the learning community that he built and that I was part of the building of, which is it's the Rise community. We're on Discord for the most part. That community of marketing and PR pros is the source of learning for me because, we tend to highlight what's happening right now and people are experimenting and playing around and sharing use cases. So it's turned out like over time that we're anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 to 5 or 6 months ahead of where I think the market is, or where kind of the standard of knowledge is about generative AI, especially. So, being part of that community, having that at my disposal, then kind of starting to get a grip on my own kind of worth and my own personal brand, all that sort of started to dovetail, and kept pointing me in certain directions.
Let's talk about use cases for AI. And I know you have some interesting use cases that you've done in the past, but specifically when it comes to supporting our personal brands,
Yeah,
and it sounds like there might be two areas where it could be useful: is helping you create new content and then helping you repurpose existing content. So let's
right.
talk about, I guess, first, like new content. Are there ways that you're using AI to generate new content or generate something new to support your brand?
Of course. And, well, can I just back up a little bit there? Because I think that there's another foundational use case for personal brand with AI that I think anybody who really wants to, kind of develop their own personal brand should be trying out. And there's no one way to do this, but it's helpful to ask your large language model of choice, to help you brainstorm and understand what your personal brand can be. And that can be done by any number of prompts, but, get a framework in mind first. There's a lot of personal brand frameworks out there. I like using, a mishmash, but I'm more of a known guy, speaking about Mark Schaefer. But I was trying to just determine what Mark calls a sustainable interest is, where the skills that really only I have, or the offering that only I can do, a little hyperbolic, but the only I statement, where that intersects with a need in the market. So these two things, where's that intersection? You start there and you kind of try to figure things out. Working with AI helps you brainstorm around that. You can pressure test your ideas, etc. You can even plug in frameworks and have it ask you questions to help you draw out your personal brand. And I'm absolutely certain that if you go on ChatGPT now and you look at the custom GPT store or the custom GPT you search for custom GPTs, there will be plenty that are going to help you tell your brand story, understand all this stuff, right? So that's the first thing, I think, understanding what your personal brand is or helping get there. There's a use cases for that for AI. But once you're kind of on your track and you kind of get where your personal brand is, new content creation is, it ranges, of course, the use cases range from simply asking AI to help you create new content in topics that are important to you. I would suggest things like using Perplexity, for example, to get a grip on what, current topics are bubbling, to kind of ask about, make sure that what you're thinking isn't, out from left field, and find sources that will help you back up what you're saying. So you can use Perplexity for things like that. But again, once you have your personal brand, go to your LLMs of choice. Set up a custom GPT if you can. Train it up in your voice. I use Claude a lot. I like to use Claude projects, and in Claude project, I've set it up so that I have the baseline instruction telling it what it is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a newsletter creator. In my case, I'm trying to create newsletters. It's supposed to be a newsletter creator for me, for the Trending Communicator, which is my podcast, and it's also kind of my newsletter. It also feeds into my company, and as a newsletter creator, here are the things that you need to be aware of. This is the voice that I want. Right, give it a lot of context. That's the kind of core prompt, and then I set it up so that every time I try to do, or every time I want to create a new newsletter, I'll think of what the idea for the newsletter is, and I'll plug it into a sort of standing prompt I have, which is something to the effect of, act as a copywriter and public relations and communications specialist. Your task is to write a newsletter about fill in the topic here. I'm going to give you all kinds of context around that, around the topic. Here's a document with my thoughts. Here's a document showing this. I give it whatever context it can, and now write the newsletter. So, without any context, it would write crap. But with plenty of context, it comes out with a really nice draft, because I've given it examples of my writing and, as part of the context, etc. So I use it that way to create new content, in general, a lot of topic generation, a lot of brainstorming. I also like to use a tool called Xmind, which is, I don't know if there's a lot of mind mappers out there, but Xmind is my mind mapping software of choice. And, there's a lot of choices out there. I mind map. I said earlier, I'm an ADHD guy. It helps me to kind of get a sense of my universe. But now, with Xmind, you can generate more arms of your mind map with just a click of an AI button. And it's kind of, generic high level stuff. But if you're trying to kind of come up with ideas around, like you get to a certain point in your mind map and you're like, I've come to the end of this trail. You click that AI button and it just, it creates 5, 10, 15, however many additional arms that you can start to explore. So it's a really great exploratory tool to figure out where your content can go. When it comes to, you asked about repurposing content, and that was the other big part of this. If you have an existing asset, let's call it, you're a video creator and you have a lot of videos, or, you're a podcaster like me and you have loads and loads of transcripts. Traditionally, you might want to dig into your archives and find something that you want to post, or that you say, I think I did an episode about this exact topic, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago. And you got to go dig and find your content and draw out what you want to draw out, and then spend all this time massaging it and, finding the quotes. It's a laborious process. Now, though, there are tools that can help you really speed that up and take that old content and make it new. So I like to use, for example, Notebook LM, which is a Google product, and I believe it's free for Google users. But Notebook LM allows you to create essentially a database or a small mini LLM of your own, using up to 50 sources, that becomes the basis of whatever you create. So, I've uploaded all of my podcast, the most recent 15 or so podcast episodes, the transcripts and the show notes into a notebook. And that becomes now my source. Then I can ask the notebook questions about the content and generate kind of like the way that Notebook LM generates content doesn't work for me as a final product, but it'll generate an outline or like good information that I can then cut and paste and use as a source for when I go to Claude or when I go to ChatGPT as one of the major inputs for whatever I'm trying to write that's new, So I can not only create like summaries or pull out quotes or things from my existing content to repurpose the audio podcast into written form, for example. I can then mix that up with current topics and say, okay, go to my Notebook LM, which has all my podcasts, and I can say, hey, I read this great article from Ethan Mollick, for example, who I talk about all the time, professor at Wharton, big AI guy. Ethan Mollick says, this. What have my guests said about that very same topic? And that gives me all kinds of new insights and perspectives that that were on, they're mine and they're my guest. It's my original IP. But with Notebook LM, I can pull it out and extract it quickly, like in seconds, and then I can use that as the basis for some interesting new content. So those are some of the use cases I follow, and then you can go in any different direction with written content, of course, with any of these LLMs. That's what they do. And you want to get adventurous, you can add images in, using the content you create. You can draw out more themes from your content and go over to Midjourney or to Dolly or whatever you use and create images with that. So it's a really kind of very, it's almost an endless or infinite amount of content you can create, which presents an incredible opportunity. It also presents, this kind of need for you to make sure that what you're doing is on brand, on target, and like narrowed down to what you really want to be saying.
When you're talking with people who are trying to use AI for their marketing, their personal brands, what are some common mistakes that just frustrate you, that they're always making, that you can kind of see what they should be doing, but they're just so focused on something else or just trying to make fit a square peg into a round hole?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's so pertinent because this is exactly it's almost the core of why I went into business for myself. The main thing, and it's hard to say, oh, you're doing it wrong, because AI is what you make of it, and it's it's more of, there's a lot of individuality, individual experience that goes into how you get the most out of AI, and there's no one right way to do it. But there are certainly things that are that will not get you any benefit whatsoever, beyond that initial kind of write me an email, type of approach. The biggest mistake, I think, or the biggest kind of I guess, kind of like mistaken path, I don't know what you want to call it, but the biggest issue I see is, first of all, when marketers, PR people, whoever starts to use AI, they treat it like Google. It's a chat bot. You ask it a question, it gives you an answer. The answer it gives you is so much more, robust than what you would have gotten out of Google. You're like, oh, wow, I asked it to write a press release and it wrote me a press release. Fantastic. And then they stop, right? Or, they will ask it questions as if they're using Google or any search engine. So it's just a simple query, just like, for example, write me a press release about this product. Fine. It will do something for you. and then they stop there. Um, Whereas really the 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 approach to AI requires a very different mindset, and it requires a very different attitude, I think, as you're working with it. When you treat it like Google, you're treating it like a piece of software, like a database. It is not a database. It is not a query engine. It doesn't work that way. With AI, you have to first approach it like it's not software. You have to approach it like it is a window into another person, into a partner. Ethan Mollick calls it a co-intelligence. Working with it as a co-intelligent partner. Very different than a Google. So the very first thing that I try to help people get over is that hump. Like, oh, wait a second, this isn't Google. So it's very easy to get over that, by the way, simply by getting people hands on and showing them some examples and getting them the basics of prompting. And you'd be surprised. You think people know how to prompt, but it's a lazy person's game at this point, right? So there's all kinds of prompt frameworks that can help you. But once I say to a person the very basics, look, try that again, but this time give it a role, give it context, and tell it what it needs to do. And don't be afraid to be real specific about what you want, right? Instead of write a press release about X product, it becomes, you are a PR marketing professional. You're an expert copywriter. You have to write a press release about this widget that we just launched. Let me tell you about the widget. It's all this stuff. It does this, it does that, it does this. It's launching tomorrow. Right? The market is Gen Z. Now, write a press release for me. So that's a very different situation. You'll get a very different press release. And then, so that's the very first thing, is understanding that it's not Google. You have to talk to it differently. The next mistake, or the next big thing that I think people are running into, is they get that answer and they're like, oh, wow, it's a lot. It's not quite right, but it's good. I'm going to take that and I'm going to just kind of, have to fix it. Or they look at it and they say, oh, it made mistakes. This is useless. You have to remember that it's a chat. It is meant to be interactive. So it's at this point where, you don't give up. You go back to your Google and to your ChatGPT or to whatever it is, and you say, you know what, that's not quite right. Here's what you do. Here's what I'd like to see. And you're allowed to give it more instructions. I like to say that you should be inquisitive, inquire, ask more questions. Anytime you get an answer from AI, ask more questions. Then interrogate, be brutal. Ask a lot of questions, be a critical thinker, and then iterate. Make sure that you constantly seek to improve your answers. Repeat the inquiry and the iteration and the interrogation as much as possible. So, I'm calling it a triple I framework. There's probably a better name for that out there, but inquire, inquire, interrogate, iterate. That's after you've made your prompt. And if you start to get into that cycle, you will get amazing things from your AI, and maybe get it to the point where it's writing, instead of a draft that's 60% good, it'll write a draft that's 95% good. So those are the two big things. There are larger issues with when it comes to enterprise, et cetera. But I think for your for your normal person who's using it, those are the main things to get over.
Well, speaking of kind of the average personal brander who coach consultant, someone who would want to come to you and say, help me figure out this AI thing to help me grow my personal brand, help me create content, etc. What are some of the things that they need to make sure they're coming prepared with or already have in place so that it can be a seamless process where you can just kind of dive right in and help them reach their goals with AI?
Sure. If they have an existing repository of content that they've created over time, that's the best scenario. Where and the content, I'm assuming the content is along the lines of their personal brand. They've been a podcaster about healthcare for who knows how many episodes. All right, they come equipped with something. So having being on your track, understanding sort of what direction you're going already with your personal brand is one path to a seamless kind of, you know, way to start working with AI more effectively and boost your personal brand. But the same can also be said for almost anybody at any stage of that personal brand process, because if you don't have a lot of content, then the challenge is different, but the solution is pretty, can be seamless as well. Okay, you don't have a lot of content, but you know where you want to be developing content. You know what kind of content you want to be developing based on your personal brand or based on the market that you're looking at, your repository of knowledge. Well, then we can start to work with AI to get the basics out. We can start to go from a basic level, and when I say basic, I mean, your your blog posts or your podcast ideas or your video scripts, these kinds of things, ideas. You can start right away, and it's not that difficult to get going once you come armed. If you come armed with a direction and an idea, and that then in some cases I think that's the hardest part for people with personal brand is landing on that direction and that idea, and knowing when you're on it.
And if someone wants to work with you, then what is kind of like the average, or someone like you, what is like the average process or phases that are involved with working with someone like you, like initial reach out to like completed,
Mm-hmm.
successful, AI integrated.
Engagement, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's a very it depends type of an answer, and because it is consulting, so there's no one size fits all for any of this. But for a typical, let's say it's a content, you come with a body of content, and that's what you want to do. You want to repurpose that content. Well, then it's reach out to me. We have a discussion about it. We come up with a strategy. We figure out what channels are most important to you. We figure out what what your voice is. All the kind of basic kind of prerequisites for creating good content. There's a briefing process. It doesn't take more than an hour or so, but we would talk and go through, what it is that you're looking for. Then we get to building the engine together. I mean, I could do it myself for clients who wish that to happen, but I think it's a far more rewarding process, and certainly will be repeatable and kind of easy to evolve if I work with somebody and kind of help them create their own engine in a lot of ways. And then once we get the content in the right places, once we have the I guess the database of content or the repository all set up. In the case of Notebook LM, for example, it's the sources, but if it's not Notebook LM, it's something else. Once you have all that squared away, then we work together to fashion the prompts that you need. We work together to understand, how to generate the type of content that's closest to what you're looking for, so then the little pieces of the process start to come into place. And in the, when it's all said and done, you've got a workflow, you've got a repeatable process, you have tools that you know how to use, you've got prompts that that work, and you have a access to email and a phone to call me anytime when something changes or when you have a new issue. So that that's the sort of process for a content creation like engine, let's call it. If it's more of a training situation, like, hey, I really want to get up to speed on AI, I've developed modules that range from an hour long session to a full day where and again, it depends on if it's just a single person. You don't want to be sitting with me for a full day going through group exercises. That doesn't make any sense. But to sit down for an hour or so and kind of get hands on with AI in a more coaching type of a way, that's a one and done with follow up as needed. And then there's straight up workshops that you can grab for your team, for your company, and so on.
So if someone was interested in wanting to take those next steps, how can they get a hold of you?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm out there everywhere, so you can reach me in any number of ways, but certainly you can go to beinquisitive.com. It's b-inquisitive.com. And inquire through the web. You can reach me through email, dan at beinquisitive.com. Don't forget the hyphen. Uh, I'm on LinkedIn, very active on LinkedIn. You can look for me on LinkedIn. And, you know, uh, it you can Google me. I mean, I'm out there pretty much pretty much everywhere. You can go to the Trending Communicator, my podcast, and reach out to me that way. So there's no shortage of ways, but the quickest way to, if you're interested in really creating a relationship of some kind of, for discussing business, discussing your needs, you either direct message me on LinkedIn or send me an email at dan@beinquisitive.com.
Perfect. Well, that's all for today's episode of Personal Brand Blueprint. A big thank you to Dan for being on today's episode and walking us through how we can grow and monetize our personal brands using the power of AI. To learn more about how to launch, grow, and monetize your personal brand, make sure to subscribe to the Personal Brand Blueprint podcast. Follow me, Dave Polykoff, on LinkedIn, as well as Dan. And check out zenpost.com for ways that we can work together directly. Links to all three, plus all of Dan's links to his offers and his socials, will be in the show notes below. And thanks, and see you on the next episode of Personal Brand Blueprint.
Thanks, Dave.